Good Saturday morning, everyone. Today on Perspectives, we hear how we can learn about Black history year-round on the Dora Findlay Historic African American Trail. Since its inception, the organization has brought to life the many accomplishments as well as sacrifices by local African Americans, from the challenges of the free people before the Civil War, Africatown, to the change to Mobile's mayor-council form of government. The history of the civil rights movement in Mobile is also incorporated into the tours conducted by this nonprofit organization. They have now added 2 more historic markers to bring to life what was a troubled civil rights struggle fought in the federal courts, as well as an almost forgotten section of the Black community in the Spring Hill area of Mobile. Our guest this morning is Finley with the Dora Findlay Historic Trail, a volunteer and historian both for the civil rights movement as well as the cultural impact of African Americans here on the Gulf Coast. We'll learn more about how the mayor-council form of government in Mobile came about and the federal judge who spearheaded the change as Perspectives continues after this quick break. Our guest this morning, Finley. He's with the Dora Findlay African American Heritage Trail. And Eric, always a pleasure to have you on as we talk about some of the incredible work that your organization is doing here in the area, especially in the area of recognizing the total history of the Mobile community. Good morning.
Good morning, Eric. It's always a pleasure to be here with you. And for the listeners, I guess, you know, my name is Eric and your name is Eric, so I'm thanking both of us.
All right. Well, as we start talking this morning, why don't we talk first about the reason for Black history, which started out as Black History Week back under Dr. Carter G. Woodson. But give us an idea of why we observe this month and the things that we try and be able to share and learn more about.
Excellent. Dr. Carter G. Woodson back in 1924 established what at that time was a Negro History Week. And Professor Woodson was the second PhD graduate from Harvard. The first PhD graduate was W.E.B. Du Bois.
Yes.
And Professor Woodson had a focus that it was so important that the community and the world knew about all of the positive contributions that African Americans had made to this country, and wanted that information to be known throughout the country. And so February was actually selected because it was the birthday month of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. And so thus the Black History Week was initially started. And then in the 60s, of course, there was so much history that under President Ford, we then moved it to a Black History Month. And we have been celebrating Black History Month since that time.
You know, a lot of people talk about expecting these things to be taught in their schools, or their children have had an opportunity to learn them. And we hear over the years, and we all have grown up ourselves in different parts of the country, and very little of this information is shared other than 2 or 3 people that we all know, and we celebrate the contributions they've made. So it is important, right, for us to know more about the numerous contributions.
And it is. I am a docent with the Dora Findlay African American Heritage Trail here in Mobile, which was established in 2005 by Dora Finley, who was my double first cousin. And Dora spent about 5 years doing research on African American places and individuals that made significant contributions to the city of Mobile. And we have been providing and sharing historical information about African Americans in Mobile since that time. In fact, we have approximately 43 markers throughout the city. And it's just amazing when we do these tours, the response that we get, mostly from Mobilians that never knew of the history, the rich history that we have in our community.
Well, you know, when we talk about the markers and you try to add new ones every, I guess, certain period of time, and you had 2 that were added in September of 21, erected here locally, and I think one has a very special significance, and I've had a chance to do some reading after you shared it with me in the history of that aspect. But why don't you talk first about the one social change and the incredible change that happened in Mobile due to these 2 people, as well as a group of others who were part of the initiation to make this political change in Mobile.
And we are referring to the social justice marker, which was unveiled in September of 2021 in front of the courthouse on Royal Street. I'm sorry, on St. Joseph. And of course, you know, we have a new courthouse, but this is in front of the John C. Campbell Courthouse. Mm-hmm. And it was a result of African Americans not being represented by the city government. We had a city commission form of government from 1911, 3 city commissioners that were elected at large. Blacks have always been a majority in the city of Mobile, but we did not have leadership representation. And communities had been asking for just basic services like street paved and sidewalks and recreation centers, and in a lot of cases would get the okey doke, okay, but because the districts were at large, there was never representation, and those individuals knew that they could not be voted out of office at that time. And the NAACP, under the leadership of Mr. John LaFleur, and the plaintiff at that time was Mr. Wally Bolden, who was a longtime civil rights member in Mobile. They sued the city of Mobile along with 13 plaintiffs, and the suit was to have proper representation in the city. And of course that case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court reviewed it, and they remanded it back to the lower court because they did not feel that there were discriminatory practices being administered in Mobile. They felt that blacks had the right to vote, and as a result of that, there was no intent. And that was based off of a case out of Tuskegee in the 1960s. It was the Gomillion versus Lightfoot, which at that time they drew the districts to eliminate all of the African Americans in the Tuskegee area, most of the African Americans, and that suit prevented African Americans from voting in that district. And so when this suit went to the Supreme Court, of course, they did not see where there was any problems with African American voting. And so it was remanded back to the lower court, and after about 12 to 15 years of that case moving between the courts, a local attorney presented what we refer to as a smoking gun letter that indicated one of the state representatives from Mobile, who was an attorney back in 1909, had a document that stated that the at-large system that was set up should be continued to disenfranchise blacks from voting. And when Judge Virgil Pittman, who was the district judge in Mobile at that time, reviewed that letter, he reopened the case. And legislation was then enacted and voted upon to change the form of government in Mobile. And of course, the people voted on that for it to be 7 districts with a mayor. and it was approved, and it was probably one of the most profound decisions made in the city, because 3 of those districts were African American, and we've had 3 African Americans on the city council ever since, along with a African American mayor. So it was, again, one of the most profound decisions made in Mobile as a result of that legal case.
And of course, that's Judge Virgil Pittman, and we're going to talk more about that when we come back from this break, because I thought it was very interesting that he was appointed to the federal judgeship by LBJ, so it's really some historical connections there. Eric, we're going to take a quick break here on Perspectives this Saturday morning, and when we come back, more of our conversation with Eric Finley, and of course, learning more about the Dora Franklin Findlay African American Heritage Trail. Perspectives continues in just a moment. Welcome back to Perspectives. Our guest this morning, Eric Finley. We're talking about some of the new historical markers that have been put in place here in the Mobile community. And Eric, you were wrapping up on Judge Virgil Pittman, and one of the articles I saw written about him says, "The man who changed Mobile forever." And I love this statement that was made. It said that no Mobilian in his lifetime was more criticized for doing more good for more people. He really took a stand to hold firm to the ruling that changed city government forever here in the city of Mobile.
Yes, he was a real statesman, and operated under an enormous amount of pressure at that time, because he made some decisions that went against the grain of this city. There's some press register articles that one can research with some stories about how he was treated, and the feelings and the thoughts that went against him for the decision that he made. You know, to paraphrase it, you might say that they did not just want to run him out of Mobile in the United States, but including South America. My goodness, out of the hemisphere. Yes, for completely. That decision. Well, quite a man, and of course, thank you for the historical marker to recognize the contribution. And this, it sort of tells a story, because African American history is history of Americans who happen to be African American in America, and it's always a mixture of some of the great things that have happened in this country, where it wasn't just African Americans happening, but it was a coalition of people working together. And so I think it's so fitting that you're recognizing Judge Pittman along with Wiley Bolden and the others who brought that historic change here. Let's shift gears. You have another new marker. It's the Sandtown community, and this one is very interesting as well. The history tied into, I guess you could say, the Catholic Church in Mobile, and the evolution of those worshiping there in that part of West Mobile in the Spring Hill community. Give us a little insight into the Sandtown Marker. Yes, the Sandtown Marker is a small community that we traveled through quite a bit, but most people never really knew that it existed, from the 1840s. And it is just south of, I'm sorry, it's just west of St. Ignatius School on Spring Hill Avenue. Yes. There's one street there that's labeled, that's known as Knowles. And then there are 2 streets that are parallel to Spring Hill Avenue on the south side. There's Mordecai and Ships Lane. And these are black communities that had their own school, their own church. There's even a cemetery on Knowles Lane. Yes. In that area. And these were African Americans, some were free, some were slave, and indigenous people that lived in that area. And they initially attended church at St. Joseph's on Spring Hill College. Mm-hmm. And after some time, they built a log cabin on a log church on McGregor and Spring Hill Avenue.
And that was initiated by the diocese, I guess?
Yes, the Jesuit priests.
Okay.
And in around the 60s, then they joined St. Ignatius Church, which is currently on Spring Hill Avenue. And they attended services there, as well as Most Pure Heart of Mary, which is over on Dr. Martin Luther King Boulevard. A lot of them attended school there as well as church at both locations.
Now the log cabin, though, is still there today, but it is now the AME Zion Church, correct?
That is correct. It is on the corner of Spring Hill and Knowles Lane, and it is Mount Hebron AME Church that is still active in that location.
I was blown away when I learned that from you sharing it with me, and of course I have friends that live down Knowles Lane, and that it's a very deceptive kind of situation when you don't know what's down that lane, and just opens up into communities, and as you mentioned, even a cemetery where folks were buried since the 1840s there in that area. So why was Sandtown recognized as a historical marker?
It was recognized because there are still descendants that live in that area, and of course when we think of Spring Hill, we see it in its current day.
Yes. And
those individuals were there long time before Spring Hill was the community that we see it as at this point. And those individuals pretty much built their own homes, they built their own school. They were very resilient, and they survived during some very turbulent times.
Yes.
And they're still there today.
Eric, we've got about a couple of minutes left here. Let's talk about the importance of taking this throughout the year, because that's one of the reasons you have the trail, is that this can be a year-round learning experience.
Yes. Of course, I'm a member of the Dora Franklin Finley African American Heritage Trail. And just for discussion, the trail's initial name was the Black Heritage Trail. And Dora, unfortunately, passed from pancreatic cancer 7 years ago. And at that time, the mayor and the city renamed the trail after Dora. However, we have historical markers on individuals that made successful contributions to the city that are not Finleys or Franklins.
Yes.
There's only one or two, and the rest of them are other individuals from the city. Yes. But I'm one member of, we are a nonprofit 501c3. Our president is Attorney Carlos Finley, and vice president is Dr. Cheryl Franklin. And we all reach consensus, and we continue to unveil history.
Yes.
Throughout the city as well as Africatown.
And of course, tours are available, both walking as well as automobile tours and buses. And then of course, we can go to a website and Facebook page for more information as well.
That's correct. And we do tours 365 days a year by appointment, Monday through Sunday. And we're on the web as the Dora Franklin Finley African American Heritage Trail, or www.dffaaht.org. And we have walking tours, we have coach tours for 14 passengers, 29 passengers, and we'll step on a 55-passenger bus and take you through downtown, around Africatown. Of course, we go in depth with the Clotilda story, and then we visit successful entrepreneurs that were in Mobile from the 1880s, and actually some of them from the 1700s when the city was first started.
Eric, take about 15, 20 seconds and tell us why this is so important to you.
The reason it's important is because, as you said earlier, it's not in the history books. And when we share this history with the young adults, it gives them an opportunity to see that there are successful people that look like them. and that these people attended the same schools that they're attending in Mobile today. And so they could be that person that's on the platform if they just follow the processes, get their education, and they can be successful. And not that we want to put them on a marker, but we do want them to be successful. And this is an encouragement and a spur when they see the pharmacists, the doctors, the business people, the ministers, just entrepreneurs from all walks of life that are right here in Mobile that became very successful.
And of course, as you all say on the trail information, it's so important to know where you've come from so you can know where you're going.
Most important, especially during these times, because there's so much that is similar to what was happening during Reconstruction. And we always invite people to do research. We can only give you a short version of the history. And there are a lot of similarities to
Eric
that
Finley,
period.
we thank you so much for being a part of the discussion today and sharing some very important information. Thanks again for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
And of course, for more information, please check out the website, Dora Franklin Finley African American Heritage Trail. That's dffaaht.org for all of your tour information. You can also call them at the area code there, 251-725-2236. They'd love to hear from you as well. Well, next up on Perspectives, have you thought much about climate change? Well, have you recognized or observed any changes here in our area on the Gulf Coast? Well, scientists say that there is evidence actually everywhere around us. They call it direct and indirect evidence, like produce that used to grow extremely well here, but now it's too warm to get the same harvest farmers had less than a decade ago. There are also concerns about rising sea levels in the Gulf that they say will only get worse. So what can we do? Well, we talk with local scientists about climate change. Well, please join us here next Saturday morning for Perspectives as we discuss those important issues and seek solutions. And go to our Fox 10 YouTube channel for past programs. I'm Eric Reynolds. Have a great week ahead.
Thanks for watching Fox 10 News. Watch us live wherever you are, on our mobile, our streaming news app, and you can also watch us on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV.